So it seems like we go a few weeks without getting any Rings of Power news, and then all of a sudden we get slapped with a bunch of articles regarding Rings of Power, and now we have yet another one. So the Lord of the Rings of Power showrunner just recently came out in an interview and tried to explain the reasoning why they decided to ignore Tolkien's writings and depict their own creation of Mordor. Now, this is something that we've said multiple times, and they've denied it multiple times as well. And they tried to say, oh, they went back to the books, back to the books. We promise. We totally respected Tolkien's work. We just wanted to do our own thing while using his inspiration. But at the end of the day, they didn't use his inspiration really at all. They completely ignored his works to the point where it's basically a very bad version of a fan fiction. And honestly, I've seen fan fiction that is much better. So we're going to get into the article, guys. This one comes from some good old Bounding into Comics, and it says, The Lord of the Rings of Power showrunner explains why they decided to ignore Tolkien's writings and depict their own creation of Mordor. The Lord of the Rings of Power showrunner Patrick McKay explained why he and Prime Video decided to ignore J.R.R. Tolkien's writing and depict their own creation of Mordor. Now, the worst thing that you could do, in my opinion, as a Hollywood, director or Hollywood showrunner, is that if you're adapting a known source work, right? If you're adapting that work, the worst thing you can do is ignore that work. Honestly, it really is. Like, especially if it's from a time that didn't have identity politics like J.R.R. Tolkien. If it's from that time and he wrote simply from a true fantasy standpoint that he was trying to build his own world, I guarantee you his mindset was at the right place and he made a beautiful world to explore. And you deciding to ignore that because you want to do whatever you want to do with it, it's not really that great. It's almost guaranteed to fail because your mindset is not in the same place as the original author. You need to respect the original work if you're going to adapt something like Lord of the Rings. And if you don't, then you're going to just keep doing what you're doing, which is, it's seemingly that's what you're okay with. You're okay with losing money, so it's fine. It says McKay spoke to the Hollywood Reporter about the show's 6th episode that showed the orcs dug a giant tunnel into the heart of a volcano. The tunnel was then filled with water after a dam broke. After the massive flood of water made contact with burning hot lava, it created an explosion that destroyed much of the surrounding land and covered it in ash. By the show's 8th and final episode of the season, Halbrand is revealed to be Sauron and Mordor is shown covered in black with Mount Doom still billowing out smoke and lava pouring down its sides. McKay explained the scene, saying a huge theme in Tolkien is the environmentalism and the way machines and industrializations destroy the land. We wanted that to be essential and core at all times. It's a thing that comes up again and again throughout the show. He then revealed, so in the writer's room, we asked, what if Mordor was beautiful, all bucolic like Switzerland, and then what could happen that could transform it? We talked about the poisoning of the land, which starts in the first episode with the cow. Then you find out about the tunnels being dug, and sulfur is going up in the air. It all builds towards this geologically realistic way, of igniting the mountain, which now blacks out the sky for a very practical reason. Adar, our villain, which left our show, by the way, sees the orcs as his people, and they deserve a home where the sun doesn't torment them. We're hoping it will take people by surprise, he relayed. It took everybody by surprise. You want to know why? Because it's not what Tolkien wrote. That's the problem. Like, of course, you're going to take people by surprise if you're saying that you're going to be adapting a Lord of the Rings show based off the Second Age, and you completely do the opposite and you make up your own thing. Like, taking people by surprise is not necessarily the best way to go when it comes to adapting a known work like Lord of the Rings. Sometimes your best bet is just sticking to what made the story great in the first place. People, even though they might know what's coming based off the books, they're still excited to see it play out on screen. And if you take that away from them and you come up with some bullshit excuse or like completely nonsensical formation of Mordor, and you're trying to say, oh, look, we surprised you, at least you didn't see it coming. Nobody wanted to see that coming. That's the problem. Nobody was interested in seeing that coming, and that's why you face the issues you face today, is because you're trying to pass off this nonsense as a smarter version of Mordor's creation when you should have just kept to the books and people would have been excited to see that play out on screen. Instead, you came up with this Cheetos freaking Galadriel that nobody fucking believed that she survived that volcano, let alone everybody else who didn't die from that volcano exploding anyway. It says, however, this is not how Mordor came about at all. In fact, the land was not idyllic or bucolic like in Switzerland. It had repeatedly been hammered by the eruptions of Mount Doom over the year, and thus was the desolate readers and viewers of The Lord of the Rings know. In The Peoples of Middle-earth, Christopher Tolkien writes in the notes section of the book that the name Mordor was maybe already an elvish name for that region because of its volcano Orodruin and its eruptions, which were not made by Sauron but were a relic of the devastating works of Melkor in the long First Age. And that's the problem. Like, they completely ignore established history because they're trying to rush, right? So they need to rush through it because they use the excuse, oh, it's a television show. We can't flesh out the story like that. We have to jump time. We have to rush. We have to go through certain things. Some things don't translate to TV as good as they do in the books. I call that nonsense, okay? I really do, because I've seen multiple fantasy works done properly based off books without rushing anything. I mean, look at the Harry Potter series, for example. The movies were great. Were they one-to-one to the books? Absolutely not. But the little things that they changed, the little story tidbits that they had to cut out to make it faster for the movies, they did it in a way that everybody still got the gist of the story from the source material. They didn't change anything, really. So they stuck true, and they made it work. And the original Lord of the Rings trilogy did the same thing. They made some changes. They sped up some things, like they got rid of Tom Bombadil completely, for example, but they still made the story work. They still stayed true to the source material to the point where at least the story was told in a way that people can understand for those who didn't read the books, and they didn't feel totally robbed of the true experience. That's the problem with these people who are running this show. They think that they can't do that. I don't know why they think they can't do that, but I just think it's an excuse so they can do whatever the hell they really want to do. It says in the Silmarillion, Tolkien details that Sauron made Mordor his home because of the volcano. He wrote, there above the valley of Gorgoroth was built his fortress, vast and strong, Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, and then there was a fiery mountain in the land that the elves named Orod-Ruin. Indeed, for that reason, Sauron had set there his dwelling long before, for he used the fire that welled there from the heart of the earth in his sorceries and in his forging, and in the midst of the land of Mordor he had fashioned the ruling ring. And that's another problem too. Not only did you change the formation of Mordor completely, but you also changed the formation of the Rings of Power completely. So none of this is true to the story whatsoever. It's completely made up fan fiction. It says not only is this noted in the Peoples of Middle-earth in the Silmarillion, but in letter 131 to Milton Waldman, J.R.R. Tolkien also notes how Sauron's original intentions to stay in Middle-earth were fair, and that those intentions were the reorganizing and rehabilitation of the ruin of Middle-earth. Tolkien wrote to Waldman in the Silmarillion in the Tales of the First Age, Sauron was being of Valinor perverted to the service of the enemy and becoming his chief captain and servant. He repents in fear when the first enemy is utterly defeated, but in the end does not do as was commanded, return to the judgment of the gods. He lingers in Middle-earth very slowly, beginning with the fair motives, the reorganizing and rehabilitation of the ruin of Middle-earth. Neglected by the gods, he becomes a reincarnation of evil and thing lusting for complete power, and so consumed ever more fiercely with hate, especially of gods and elves. So listen, at the end of the day, man, what they decided to do with the Rings of Power is a complete bastardization of Tolkien's works. I think that's something we can all agree on at this point, and they're going to keep doing it because they have this vendetta against known literary work, especially if it comes from a white person, to be honest with you. They have this vendetta against them, and they are going to do what they're going to do in order to destroy that entire lineage as best they possibly can so that they can create their own lineage for the future that is growing up on this nonsense. That's what they're trying to do. So this is more important to them than gaining money at this point. Amazon has all the money in the world, so they have nothing to lose, really. And the money that they do choose to lose, they're going to make it up elsewhere. And they're going to, as long as they break even while pushing the message, that's all that matters to them, and they're going to continue to do so. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought of today's story, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.